Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our penultimate part of the Research Festival. I think it is. I'm Holly Prescott. I'm the Careers Advisor for Postgraduate Researchers here at the University of Birmingham, and going to be chairing our Research Perspectives session today. So a very big welcome to you all. So you will probably already know that this is day 2 of the Research Festival, which is part of the bigger UOB Extra event. And coming up next after this session is the University Graduate School Awards ceremony and drinks reception. So that's open to everyone. It will be taking place between 3 and 5 p.m. In the Lecture Theatre 1 and the lower ground floor foyer of this building. So I'd encourage you all to head on to the awards ceremony and the reception when we've finished with this panel. So what are we going to be doing in the next hour? We're going to be hearing some talks by some current postgraduate and early career researchers from across the university about the impact that collaboration has had on their research, and that's going to include the work that they've done with other academics, with charities, with local councils and with arts organisations, just to mention a few. We're going to hear from 4 speakers. We'll be hearing from Dr. Grace Tidmarsh, who is currently a postdoc research and teaching fellow over in the School of Sport, Exercise and Rehabilitation Sciences. We'll be hearing from Sarah Canova, who is a current PhD researcher in music and a composer and a conductor. We'll be hearing from Dr. Asli Kandemir, who's a current research fellow in our School of Education, and from Laurie Duncan, a part-time PhD researcher in Energy Systems and Policy Analysis Research Group. So that's who we're going to be hearing from this afternoon. A mix of different disciplines, a mix of postgraduate and postdoctoral researchers, all of whom have had collaboration be a key part of their work so far. And I've been asked to speak a little bit about collaboration itself as well, which I think is an interesting topic. So I wanted to begin with this image behind me, because I remember when I was doing my PhD and people would talk to me about collaboration, I thought, sounds like a lot of hard work. Really? I think I'd rather just sit in my office or sit in the library, do my own thing where I feel like I'm in control of everything, right? But actually, that's not the way that things are going these days. Sitting by yourself, just sort of trying to come up with ideas and everything being in your own head can be quite difficult and stressful. And actually, academia these days is moving much more towards collaboration, collaborative projects and things like that. And I just wanted to mention why that is, or at least a couple of reasons why that is. And here's one of them behind me. So I don't know if anybody in the room is familiar with the Knowledge Exchange Framework, or the KEF, which is one of a few metrics that we have in higher education in the UK, measuring the outputs and the work that is done by academic institutions. And what the Knowledge Exchange Framework does is it tries to measure how much and how well universities engage with things beyond them. So if you have a look, what it does is it gives each university a score for 7 different things, okay? And these 7 different things that universities are expected to do are research partnerships, so undertake research in partnership with other organisations, working with business, so working with the private sector, working with the public and the third sector, CPD and graduate startups, so that means helping current students to build businesses and to offer professional development opportunities to kind of wider population. Contributing to local growth and regeneration. IP and commercialisation, so whereas research actually translated into patents or products or things like that out in the world. And then finally, public and community engagement. So each UK university is kind of given a ranking in those, how well it's doing in those 7 areas, represented on these quite sort of, I think, random looking charts, ranking them from low engagement all the way up to very high. So collaboration can actually get you a long way towards achieving quite a lot of these markers of knowledge exchange, that become increasingly important ways in which work within universities is viewed. But also, what does it mean for you as individuals as well? I thought I would go on to jobs.ac.uk, so one of the most popular academic or higher education job searching websites, and ask the question, where is this important when you're going for jobs? Why is collaboration an important thing to be able to demonstrate for whatever you might want to do after your postgraduate research? And I got quite a lot of results. So behind me here, I've put a screenshot from a job advert for a research associate in social policy at the University of York, where it says that this role will sit within the School of Business, but with regular collaboration with colleagues in business school in another university and with the NHS as well. So a lot of postdoc projects now involving a lot of collaboration, both with other higher education institutions and with other stakeholders as well. And a lot in this actual role where you would be doing collaborative working, collaboration with colleagues on joint projects, and also identifying potential opportunities for collaboration as well. So really looking for somebody who's got evidence of being able to collaborate there for a postdoc role. Here, I think that's where I've just zoomed in on the fact that it'd be asking people to conduct experience of individual and collaborative research projects as well. There's another postdoc here in a different area. This is in computing this time. Again, the person who does this job would work in close collaboration with a robot scientist team in Cambridge, as well as project collaborators in Japan. So again, increasingly in postdoc roles, a lot being asked of researchers, not just to work independently or even work with their local team, but to collaborate wider as well. So if you've got evidence you can do that, that'd be really useful. And there's an example of experience of working on collaboration with research partners actually named in a person specification for an academic job. Okay. So this stuff is relevant, potentially directly to what you might do next. And there are lots of other benefits of collaboration as well, from helping you to show the impact and the value of what you're doing, through to helping you draw on wider bank of skills and resources, even things like avoiding duplication if you're bringing other people into your work, so that you're not don't have 2 teams of people doing the same thing. Even broader things like developing your networks beyond academia and potentially leading to contacts or employment opportunities after your PhD as well. So lots of benefits of collaboration. So let's hand over to the people who have done it. So I'm going to invite our first speaker, Grace, to come up. And you're going to have, so we'll hear from each one of our speakers next to each other. If you've got slides, Grace, do we need to?
I think it's all just in one big.
It's all in one big one.
I think.
Okay, great. So I'll leave it with you.
Thanks, Holly. So Holly's already don't seem to be on the big screen. Someone could just. So this is another good example of why it's important to collaborate, so that you've got people to do the things that you don't know how to do.
Is it the projector? Yeah, the projector's turning itself off, so I just saw that now. Projector's turning themselves off. Where's that hard reset button gone? Is that it? It's on there now. You've got it on one side. Yeah. Right, on one, not the other? Is that enough? Or do you want me to?
That's fine.
Is that okay?
Yeah, so we're going to roll with one screen. Firstly, it was great to see all the variety of posters at the poster session earlier this morning as well, and see the huge variety of work that's going on across the university. And thank you, Holly, for the introduction earlier as well. So I'm really excited to talk to you all today about sort of exploring collaboration and connection in the context of research with youth experiencing homelessness, and looking at how we've translated sports psychology we traditionally do with the world's best athletes to a completely different context. So first I'll do a little check-in with you, which is something we do as part of our best practice. Then we'll have a brief look at the UK youth homelessness context before looking into the My Strength Training for Life, or MST for Life programme. And I'll kind of broadly look at how collaboration and connection has helped shape, deliver and evaluate that kind of a project. And then look specifically at how it has helped in terms of challenging homelessness stigma, and thinking back to the knowledge exchange framework that Holly just had up, thinking about how we've managed to achieve lots of public engagement with that. So first, I know we're getting into the afternoon of a Wednesday, so I guess I just wanted to see how everybody's feeling. I was definitely the second one this morning when my train was just delayed. But a little bit of time in the sun at lunch has got me more like a 3. So I guess moving to the UK youth homelessness crisis, and it's not just the UK, we know that this is a global problem. So between 2022 and 2023, we know that 136,000 young people, so that's aged 16 to 25, sought support for experiences or risk of homelessness. The important thing about this is that this is just the numbers that came forward, and is probably not necessarily reflective of the actual rates of youth homelessness in the UK. And one of the things that holds that back is the stigma and the harmful stereotypes that are associated with homelessness. Stigma is essentially thoughts and beliefs that are associated with a subgroup of the population that isolates, discriminates and separates them from society and the norms that are held within a particular culture. So when we think about homelessness and stigma, for example, we know that there's structural stigma, so the way that laws, organisations and policies might reinforce or create stigma. If we think about recent comments from Home Secretaries about criminalising it, for example. Social stigma would be more like public thoughts and perceptions and interaction. And then self-stigma is where the individual internalises the beliefs that are sort of created within the structural and social norms. So these are multi-directional interactions, and they ultimately reduce help-seeking behaviour. So despite the fact that we're able to evidence through the MST for Life project, which I'll come on to very quickly next, we can evidence that strengths-based approaches work and translating the sports psychology works in helping young people get back into employment, education and training and to live independently. The stigma inhibits their ability and capacity to come forward and receive the support that they need. So my Strengths Training for Life is based on mental skills training, which, as I said at the beginning, is something that derives from sports psychology. And most importantly, we worked alongside our community partner, St Basil's, in this project that's led by Professor Jen Cumming as part of my PhD, to adapt and co-produce this MST for Life project. So I guess when you think about collaboration and connection, the way that's going to look over the course of your PhD or whatever you go on to do next is going to look really different, and there's going to be different parts of collaboration and connection that you want to build upon at different points. So just some examples is that within your team, so who's your direct research team around you? So it could be PhD supervisors, it could be other postdocs, postgrads or undergrads that you're supporting within your research team. And that can really help with things like knowledge exchange, learning new methods, having support, but also understanding what are your own and your research team's core values and identity, because that will shape the way that you collaborate and connect with others. Then we've got partners and organizations. So as you can see on here, this is just a snapshot of some of the partners and organisations that we've worked with over the last 6 or 7 years through my PhD and my postdocs. You can see that there's work there ranging from policy, charities, across a different variety. So Youth Voice, for example, focuses predominantly on youth, and then we've got broader homelessness charities too. Then there's that interdisciplinary aspect, and I think that's really important because, as we just found out, when I can't do any of the technology, you do not have to be, and you will not be, an expert in everything. You don't have time to be, as interesting as it might be, to be able to become that, it's not possible. So being able to work in interdisciplinary teams means that we don't work in silos, and that helps us to better answer research questions and to have more strategic and impactful impact and outcomes of our projects. And finally, even outside of your team, but within your own university, you might have connections you can build with individuals or teams, like the public engagement team, the library support team. I engaged a lot with some of the library support team when I was conducting a systematic review, for example, which thankfully is done now. So I'm really lucky that I get to work with all of these people just within our research team. We've got people with public health backgrounds, compassion, imagery, outdoor, so a huge kind of mix, and that means that we get to support each other, challenge each other in really respectful ways, and ultimately just learn and have an environment that promotes collaboration. So it's really important because it helps us to understand the needs of a community organisation. So for example, when we started working with St Basil's, a lot of youth homelessness provision and homelessness provision more broadly has always been very deficit-based. So it focuses on people as the problem, their cause of their own circumstance. So-and-so can't do this. If we think about school, for example, teachers always say, they don't sit down for more than 5 minutes. Well, actually sitting for that child for 3 minutes might be quite the achievement. And that's the approach that we take when we start to understand the needs of an organisation. And for St Basil's, that was having something that was strengths-based and not deficit-based. And that when you work with them to not only develop research, but to develop the research questions, it means that you actually understand what the gap is or the question to be answered. And that means that, again, then you have much more strategic impact and meaningful outcomes to what you're doing. And as I also alluded to, sometimes you do feel like that picture at the beginning because it's hard work trying to collaborate with lots of different people. But it's by far one of the most pleasurable parts of my job every day, and getting to work with people where I see the impact of what I'm doing. And also means we get to produce things that can be translated beyond our own little projects. So we have 3 toolkits, for example, that we worked with staff and young people at St Basil's to develop. It also means that you can meet specific needs, you can move beyond what is the conventional, and that's really important when we think about research methods. These are often not always accessible for everybody we might be trying to work with. So for example, we've moved away from questionnaires and used diary rooms, and you can be flexible. You don't have to be super regimented in your research necessarily, and I think we get that a lot from lab-based projects, but actually when you're working out in communities, collaborating with others, flexibility doesn't necessarily reduce the rigorousness of your research. And your community or organisation have their own expertise, so don't forget to value that in what you're doing. We have used this approach to work with the Exchange and develop a 12-month exhibition in which we were featured. And as you can see, here's 4 of the young people from the Youth Voice who we worked with, who were involved in the project. Their involvement was really important, not just for the public engagement, because by engaging in this, the young people had professional headshots that they could then go on to use to help them move on and achieve better things in their lives. We've also been able to develop a poetry ebook based on workshops we've done with the public. But ultimately, it doesn't matter what public engagement or collaboration or connections you build. If they're not purposeful and meaningful, we run the risk of widening the gaps that we're trying to bridge. So that is kind of my thought to leave you with. And if you want to find out more, keep up to date, or pop along to the webinar at the beginning of July. You can do that by scanning the QR code. So thank you. I'll now hand over to Sarah.
Can we check if everything is on? It's on, okay, good. Okay. All right. I'm going to introduce you to a part of my PhD, which has been the composition and the conducting of a new opera. Originally, when I applied for a PhD, I meant to write an opera, which was quite abstract and not based on any existing collaboration, so in the end it didn't happen. But accidentally I got commissioned another opera by the European Capitals of Culture organization, which is quite a big thing apparently. And in 2025 those cities are going to be Gorizia and Nova Gorica. And the history of those cities is particularly special because Nova Gorica was found in ex-Yugoslavia, and Gorizia lies on the Italian-Slovenian border nowadays. So this became quite a cross-border project. It was funded by the European Festivals Fund for Emerging Artists and commissioned by the Piccolo Opera Festival based in Gorizia. The image you can see now is on a square, and the square itself is in front of the station of Nova Gorica, and it's split into 2 halves, one half being Italian and one half being Slovenian. And originally, the opera was supposed to be set there, but the show was cancelled 1 hour before happening due to a storm. So that didn't happen in the end. So this is just for context. So Gorizia is up there, really on the border, and I actually, as part of my collaboration with Piccolo Opera Festival, I went there for an on-site artistic residency in January 2023. And during this time, I was able to interview people, journalists, but also just really random people, very, very informally. All of this was not planned, and I will explain later how it contributed to my research. And visit the Museum of the Border, which was quite interesting and fed back into my approach to musical composition. And other places, among which Parco Basaglia, which is, it was a mental hospital, and it was the first mental hospital to be dismantled in Italy. Further steps of the creative process have been collaboration with the dramaturg and the linguist. One of the core values of this project was the use of a multi-language text. So I am Italian, so I am an Italian speaker, but also I used Slovenian and German and Croatian inserts in my libretto. So I used the help of a linguist. And in January to March 2023, I focused on creating a subject. I really wanted to not invade any personal feelings of people being born and raised in the territory, given that was not me. So I really needed to find connections between the topics and the trauma of the region and my own perception and my own work. So I felt the need to create a new subject and a new libretto myself, instead of borrowing something I couldn't really represent. Then the musical composition has been incredibly fast. This is not normal. Like normally operatic projects take up to 2 years to compose. So this was very, very, very forced, but rewarding in the end. And given I am also an orchestra conductor, I was invited to conduct the world premiere of this opera. And this happened in March 2024, after being postponed due to the storm, as I said before. The orchestra and the singers were also selected from the region, so they were Italian, Slovenian, Croatian, and we also collaborated with Cantus Ensemble from Zagreb. So the main project outcome, the most obvious and the most visible for now, has been the realization of the opera, which I framed in the format of a psychotherapy session, where the patient is Gorizia, the city, in a crisis. So basically she is triggered by sounds of war songs in different languages, and she doesn't know who she is anymore. She has a very fragmented identity with different traumas in different places of being, depending on what part of her is experiencing the trauma. So the Slovenian part, the Italian part, etc. And so I, as a conductor, would call during the main crisis. I would call on the phone, fake phone call, by the way, a psychotherapist, and then the opera starts, and the opera itself is a psychotherapy session. Other outcomes have been, of course, we won fundings from the European Festival Fund for Emerging Artists and the Italian Ministry of Culture. It was showcased and broadcast in radio and TV in Slovenia and Italy. And also I had a new percussion instrument built, which contribute, of course, to orchestration enrichment and orchestration research. The bigger picture of my PhD and research questions So these are my research questions. So what are possible creative connections between soundscape composition and vision? Originally thinking of auditory theater as a setting for heightening the listening and the listening awareness and different senses, and a multisensory approach to music composition from the composer, the performer, and the audience perspectives. How to manage then visual cues removal in compositional structures across different media. In fact, the opera is for orchestra, singers, and electronics. And the fact that nothing really happens, but it's a psychotherapy session, so everything is worked through verbally, but also musically. So there are several auditory cues that are not visible, and inspect the potential of linking cognition, interactivity, and composition. That is the reason why I chose this subject, the reason why I chose to put on stage something that related to these topics and the phenomenon of listening and the phenomenon of analyzing oneself. Because after all, PhD in composition is a very much practice-based, and it relies on the assumption that a piece of music produces knowledge and is knowledge, because and there is also a part of the process which is learning by doing. So the creative process again went through several phases of brainstorming with the dramaturg, and the mind map itself of the collaboration process became the opera. So the links between ideas became links between characters and events in the opera. And yeah, so this is more or less a summary of what I just said. So, but the most important thing is that I wanted to represent mental healing paths into stage settings and music dramaturgy, and link places and individuals in a way that the audience could reflect themselves into the main character, being not only a person but also a collective unit, and vice versa. Okay, and I will leave you with some pictures taken from my residency. So this was the mental hospital, as you can imagine. This was Carl Michael Stetter, a philosopher, of which I borrowed some. This is a bomb. It's a real bomb from the First World War. Mental hospital, the river, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Adjust that cable because it's going to bash against the heart. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Grace. Wonderful presentations with impressive work. Congratulations. Hi, everyone. My name is Aslı. I'm a postdoctoral research fellow in the School of Education. The project that I'm working in at the moment in the School of Education is focusing on young people's engagements with race and faith equality at schools and beyond schools. But today I would like to talk to you about what it means to me, what collaboration and connection mean to me. And in my own individual research, how I make the use of collaboration and connection. And I focus on policymakers, schools, and communities all at the same time. So I'll start by introducing myself a little bit to you, which actually underpins my interest in collaborative work. And in doing so, I will also give you some ideas about with whom and why and how I collaborate.
And as you all may be aware now, but Grace also mentioned the impact that we all, especially as early career researchers and academics, bear always in mind the impact that we create in the society, in the wider society, let alone to be in education and in academia. I will also talk to you about what impactful connections I try to make. So, I am a sociologist, a critical sociologist. I have a PhD in sociology as a Vice-Chancellor Scholar from Liverpool Hope University, but I have several other degrees from different disciplines, including IR and politics, education studies, and even philosophy, which actually makes me an interdisciplinary researcher. And during my second MA, I think, in sociology, I also worked as a researcher for one of my professors' social impact projects, which was taken place in southeastern Turkey, bordering Syria, with a Kurdish majority population in the region. And there we tried to make an impact for Kurdish women's participation to community life in Turkey. And that work has been so inspirational for me, not only as a sociologist, but also as a person who is an advocate of social justice. So I thought that I need to collaborate with different stakeholders in the wider society. So to me, this is my collaboration map. I do collaborate with, well, this is also a representation of the social structure or the social body for me. I try to collaborate with macro level people like policymakers or policy practitioners and policy stakeholders, perhaps in more regional meso level area. But I also, due to my educational background, I also collaborate with schools as institutions and communities, particularly minoritized communities. The reason why I collaborate, as I said, is mainly because I really want to make an impactful and sustainable social change for the common good. And you may know that politics, policy and society, these are intertwined, and they have a powerful impact in our everyday life. Some of you, especially my British fellows over here, citizens, they may know that during the Brexit campaign, which started in 2016, political discourse, which was also leaning towards more populist discourse, was so effective in marginalizing communities in Britain and polarizing the society. Therefore, for instance, this political discourse used the rhetoric that popular sovereignty was at stake, so the reallocation of public wealth was demanded, and anti-immigrant discourse was also at stake as a threat to the social order, which immediately affected immigration law and policies around it, which we saw as, for instance, the increase of the salary threshold for immigrant workers in Britain, which also affected their familial unity in Britain. And we also saw that this affected even international students in Britain. But it also affects pupils at the secondary school level. Sometimes they could even be considered as a threat to the social order. Therefore, we see that policies are immediately enacted in terms of sometimes even to contain young people and their freedom of expression, as we've seen in the Political Impartiality Guidelines, or in Higher Education Freedom of Speech Act. Therefore, I think it is important to me to have a sense of how to co-generate knowledge by incorporating the voice of the minoritized or marginalized groups to make an impactful and sustainable social change, as I said. So in my doctoral research, actually, I focused on fundamental British values, particularly tolerance as a fundamental British value and its impact on community cohesion. And I want to center the youth voice in my research as well as the community voice. Therefore, I conducted a case study with a British-Turkish community group living in northwest of England. And actually the community, especially the youth, came up with an alternative set of British values which were both in line and in support of fundamental British values. And they have come up with these three wonderful British values, which are equality, good character, and citizenship. Now, the methods that I use when I'm connecting and collaborating are varied. I am at the stage of writing a policy brief, for instance, because very recently I have been granted College of Social Sciences Enterprise Engagement and Impact Funding, and I designed, developed Inclusive British Values Learners Guidebook, and now I'm writing before also, well, we are getting closer to the next elections. I'm writing a policy brief and I organize roundtables with policymakers and practitioners to be able to incorporate this bottom-up approach in the national curriculum and also policymaking. I also give public lectures and workshops in schools. This picture is from the Turkish National Teachers' Day, which was celebrated by the Birmingham Turkish community last November. And there I'm also giving some information about British values and also my findings from my project. And I also advise them how to use them in their formal and non-formal educational settings. I also write reports and, as I said, guidebooks, which I will show you at the very end. But these are actually the conclusions of my research, which focuses on how we can co-generate knowledge, but also how we can become more inclusive when we reimagine national identity. And as you can see here, I have found that Britishness is contextual, it is relational and ever-changing, and it has plural meanings. So it is important to incorporate that plurality actually in policymaking processes if we are especially genuinely considering making equality, inclusivity and belonging for our nation. And Britishness can be taught in schools through character education and value teaching, but it needs to have a community, person, and youth voice centering in this teaching. And lastly, I also have found out that Britishness can be incorporated in curriculum design and pedagogic practices from, again, a pluralistic and co-generative, collaborative perspective. And for that, principles of inclusive education, as we try to apply in the University of Birmingham, or teaching for social justice, as my colleague, Professor Carl Kitching, advises to the Irish higher education, and or participatory methods through such bottom-up approaches can be effective in doing that. So this is it for me. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them all.
Right, hello everyone. I don't have any slides. I'm just going to muse on some things. I've been mulling this over since I've been asked to do this talk, and I'm sort of thinking, well, everything I do is collaboration, and it's sort of difficult to boil that all down into 10 minutes, but I'll give it a go. So just briefly, my area of research is, as described before, energy systems and policy analysis. So there's already a lot of things all bundled in together. It's very interdisciplinary. I come from a maths background. I now have a supervisor in social sciences. So it's coming from all sorts of different directions, and there's so much interesting stuff there. Initially, my PhD was going to be looking at energy systems models and how they're made, how they are modelled. Instead, I've ended up looking at how those models are used in policy making. So how are they used by policymakers? And it's broadened out from just modelling to the broader concept of evidence. We all want evidence-based policy, but that means lots of different things to lots of different people. And so I did a case study of the West Midlands Combined Authorities 5-year plan, which is their sort of climate change target, how they came up with their climate change target of net zero by 2041. I basically wanted to find out where that number comes from, what sort of things feed into making that number the target. So I wanted to sort of highlight a few different things. So I wanted to talk about curiosity as a big driver for collaboration. That's really the fundamental reason why we all do research. It's because we're interested to find out something that we don't currently know. And I think the same applies to every bit of collaboration we ever do, whether it's just a conversation with someone over coffee within your department, or in my case, my research is based on semi-structured interviews with people that know things about the thing I want to find out. So I'm curious to find out what they have to say. And so from a methodological point of view, that meant that I wasn't particularly restrictive in the people that I was going to speak to. It was very difficult at the time because it was still in COVID lockdowns. So it was difficult to go and find conferences to go and sort of get people as they were leaving and say, could I have 5 minutes of your time, please? So it was a lot of cold calling, a lot of emails just going out into the ether, and thankfully some people got back. But I'd say if you do get the chance to do that sort of thing, absolutely go and mingle with people, go and have conversations with people that are interested in your research topic, because it'll just be a really interesting conversation. It will spark more ideas. And at the end of my research interviews, I would often get the most interesting nuggets of information when we'd sort of gone off topic from the questions I was intending to ask. So I had my specific research questions and questions to ask interviewees that would hopefully glean an answer to those. But actually it was the more informal chats at the end when people often just open up a bit more, because you allow them to talk about their broader experiences, their broader work, and so on. I should also say that I'm a part-time researcher now. I started out full-time. I now work part-time at the West Midlands Combined Authority. So it seems like a bit of a conflict of interest, but all the research was done before I was offered the job. But that was as a direct result of engaging with these people as part of my interviews. I stayed in contact with some of them through some regular events that they host. I was just interested to stay part of the conversation. And as a result, they pointed out a job posting that came up and said, we think you'd be interested in this sort of thing. I am. It's very interesting. And so, it's always worth following up on these things. I'd also say, and I will caveat this with my third point, you can feel free when collaborating with others to loosen your academic restrictions. Or maybe it's better described as tailoring your restrictions. In academia, we have very, very strict guidelines for how we do things. We do things incredibly rigorously, and that's why academia is so respected. When you're engaging with broader stakeholders and collaborating with community groups, policymakers, whoever it might be, you can feel free to just sort of relax some of those strict, rigorous regulations and requirements of academic research and just sort of explore that curiosity in a slightly different context. And it means that you don't necessarily have to have a perfectly researched answer to every question you want to answer. It can just be an interesting conversation. That's often the basis of workshops. So I've attended lots of workshops. This week I was at one where we were talking about misinformation and disinformation in the net zero system. I don't really have any insights on misinformation and disinformation. But I know about net zero things, and I know about net zero things in a policy context. And so I can just sort of go in with an open mind and think, well, I'm interested to see where this goes, and I can think about what the insights are from my research and from my knowledge. You know, I've been doing this for a few years now as part of my PhD. By the end of your PhD, you'll know quite a lot about a thing, and it's worth exploring that and seeing how that connects to other people's areas of expertise. I would just caveat that with sort of the opposite point, really, which is I think it's really important to be humble and responsible with your expertise. You will often find people sort of labeling you the expert on something if you come from an academic background. And that's absolutely true about your very specific area of research. I know an awful lot about how this one policy, the 5-year plan within the West Midlands Combined Authority, was created and every bit of evidence that fed into that. That's my area of expertise. I have a good area of expertise on local net zero policy making in general and how these sorts of models and data feed into these plans. But then another degree of separation further, net zero policy at a national level. I have some insights, but I'm sort of getting further away from my credibility as an expert, in inverted commas, in those cases. So I think it's just really important when you do find yourselves in those situations, absolutely engage and follow your curiosity, but I think it's really important to recognize that you can't necessarily have the same authoritative voice when you're talking about things that are beyond your area of expertise. It's a subtle point to get, but I think it's a really important one because often academics can end up portraying themselves as experts about everything because they're experts about one thing. And I think it's in many ways, it gives you more credibility if you absolutely own the fact that you can say, well, this is my area of expertise. I can inform this conversation and I can be part of this conversation, but I can't do all of it. And being open to that is really interesting and often then does lead to another project where you go and see what is that gap in between two researchers' areas of expertise, and you can explore that and then you broaden your expertise. That's really the interesting stuff as far as I'm concerned in interdisciplinary research. I'll just finish briefly by talking about community engagement as well. So when I started this PhD, I ended up joining Community Energy Birmingham. So that was in a voluntary capacity. Again, it was just something I was interested in finding out about, and that has led to all sorts of really interesting delivery projects where we've done things. We are now giving energy advice to people that want to retrofit their homes. That's obviously related to my research. The things that come up in that, though, do not appear in my thesis. They are somewhat different areas of expertise. And so I feel as though, despite the fact that they don't perfectly overlap, they really do complement each other. Getting a bit of hands-on experience of just sort of trying to do something, I think is a really valuable thing to give a go. That might be, run a community engagement workshop, run an event, or it might be, in my case, try and put some solar panels on a GP surgery, or try and give energy advice to someone at an event. These are sorts of things that will broaden your understanding of your field in general, if not specifically adding to your literature review, for instance. But I think that is a really valuable area to explore if you can, and I would wholeheartedly encourage you to give that a go. And I think I'll leave that there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much to Grace, Sarah, Ashley, Laurie. Sarah, I'm going to show you later, I've just been looking through my holiday photos from 2010 and there's a picture of me making my friend stand on that border between Nova Gorica and Gorizia and have one foot in Slovenia and one foot in Italy. So it was really fascinating to see that, having been there. But yeah, really interesting to hear how your work has had such wide-ranging impacts and work with so many different kinds of stakeholders and collaborators. That brings us to the end of this session, and right up to 3 o'clock when we'll be starting the drinks reception and the prize giving. So we're going to be downstairs in the I don't know what to call it, sort of foyer area, and lecture theatre 1. So that's where we're going to all move next. So yeah, thank you.